Okay, let's talk about this Browns-Packers game. There's a lot to talk about here. There is a lot to talk about here. Now, for the purposes of this video just being any level of productive, any level of good conversation coming from this video, I'm going to urge everybody to put your hot takes in a box and let that sit for like 15 minutes or however long this video is going to be, right? Your urge to say we should cut a starter, your urge to say we should trade somebody after the trade deadline, your urge to say we should fire all of the coaches. Let's just put that in a box, put that over there in the corner, and ignore it for about 15 minutes while we try to have this talk here, because there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of honest conversations that we need to have about a lot of people on this team. And there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad here, right? I think that's pretty much what this game was. If you describe it in one phrase, a lot of good, a lot of bad. Let's start about the a lot of good, and that's this defense. Now, I know some people are going to find a way to complain about this defense because it seems like no matter what this defense does, people find a way to get mad at it. But there is no room to complain about anything this defense did this week. Yeah, you could say they didn't do the greatest job covering Aaron Rodgers and covering Davante Adams. Davante Adams did have 114 yards for 2 touchdowns, but it's Davante Adams and it's Aaron Rodgers, right? Like, I'm not going to be upset that Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers had a good game as if that were like Nick Mullins and like Derek Willis, right? Like, these are not bums. These are two of the best at their position in the NFL. You're going to live with that. Yes, Miles and Denzel didn't have the greatest game in the world. And that's why I'm actually more impressed and more proud of this defense, right? 2 of the star players didn't really have their big games, right? Miles is nursing that hamstring injury. He really doesn't look 100%. Denzel had a rough assignment here with Davante Adams, and honestly, Davante Adams was murdering him every time he went against him. I honestly felt like MJ Stewart did a better job covering him, but that might just be because of circumstance, and MJ Stewart only really covered him in the slot, not on the boundary like Denzel Ward did. But nonetheless, it was a rough day for the 2 star players, but people like JOK were stepping up. MJ Stewart stepped up big time. I felt like all the linebackers, a lot of defensive players, Sheldon Day stepped up, Grant Delpit, all those guys, I think, stepped up, played a big game here, and were great. The Browns had 4 turnovers. Now, really effectively, 3 turnovers. The 4th one was the interception at the end of the game. The Browns had 3 turnovers in the first half, and I believe they gave up 21 points in that first half with those 3 turnovers. In the second half, with only the 1 turnover at the end of the game, so effectively for the defense at least, with giving up no turnovers, the defense only gave up 3 points, which means obviously, like, yes, if there were no 3 interceptions, you probably do have a much better chance to win this game. That being said, defensively, they showed up. The fact that you had that many turnovers, that many extra possessions for this good of an offense, and you only gave up 24 points, you gave your team a chance to win at every dying inch. Can't be upset with the defense. Can't even remotely find a way to do it. Refuse to do it. If anybody talks about firing Joe Woods or getting rid of anybody on the defense, just politely ignore them because they don't know what they're talking about at this point, right? They have been great. This defense has been the only thing worthwhile watching on a team that has been mind-blowingly disappointing this year. So that is the main bulk of what I have to talk about on the defense. Offensively, the run game was really good, especially in the second half. In the first half, it was okay, but in the second half, it really got going, this run game. Nick Chubb especially, he was dynamite in this second half. I felt like we probably should have went to him more in that last drive. We'll talk about the last drive. But Nick Chubb, 17 carries, 126 yards, a touchdown. Just a great game for him. I think he had like 7 yards per carry. Dearness Johnson got a huge 20-yard run on a 3rd and 11. That really helped this team put up points on the board. The run game in the second half was absolutely incredible. Anthony Schwartz had 2 10-yard runs on end arounds. Even Baker had 2 runs for 11 yards there, and he got a couple of first downs with his legs. The run game was great. But we really, really, really need to talk about the receiving game. And this is where I urge everybody, well, not the receiving game, the passing game. This is where I urge everybody to just put your hot takes aside, right? Because I know whenever I mention the name Baker Mayfield, if I say anything about this dude, it's either going to be put in one extreme camp or the other, right? That's what it's been this year. I get called a Baker apologist and a Baker hater at the same time for saying the same thing that two people just have interpreted differently. This happens all the time. I am not on either side of those arguments. I am just trying to tell you what it is that I see with Baker Mayfield, what it is that I like about him, what it is that I don't like about him, and what I think the future is with him. And this was a Baker Mayfield game right here, right? This was everything. Like, I feel like if you cut this game in half, you have Baker Mayfield's worst game and his best game all in the same one. Like, this game was the equivalent of those peanut butter and jelly. Like, you know how they sell the peanut butter and jelly, but it's like all one thing, and they got like the half jelly, the half peanut butter, right? This was Baker Mayfield's best performance almost of the year, his second best performance of the year, and his worst performance of the year. All in one game, man. All in one game. Now, he threw 4 interceptions. I will say 2 of those interceptions, they ain't really his fault. There was the one pass interference play that should have got called, and then there's obviously the one at the end that should have got called. Now, it didn't. You lose the game. It is what it is. It counts. And the fact of the matter is, he threw one at the beginning of the fourth quarter that would have been one of the most egregious interceptions I have seen thrown in the fourth quarter. Like, it would have been really bad if that were caught. So I'm not really going to cut him that much slack because 2 of his interceptions shouldn't have been there. The other 2 up for debate, right? Jarvis fell down on one, but I don't know where that ball was going. I have to see the all 22 before I can like really have a strong opinion about that. And then the other one was that deep ball to start that drive in the first quarter, where he just kind of let it loose deep. I feel like that's more of a play call than it is a decision made by him. But either way, the ball shouldn't have went there, right? Like, somebody should have not made that decision. I don't know if it's the quarterback, the coaching staff, or whoever it is. I'm not really interested in divulging blame right now when I don't have enough information to, decide where the finger should be pointed at. So, yeah, the 4 interceptions were bad. Obviously, you gave up 21 points off of 3 of those interceptions. In their last interception, they just took a knee out because they won the game at that point. So 21 points off of those interceptions. The Packers were only able to score 3 points off of true possessions. That's going to suck, man. That sucks, right? And as much as I felt like Baker played well enough to keep you in this game at points, I also feel like, he threw the interceptions that kept the Packers at the top of this game, right? And let's talk about that, because as bad as he played in parts, again, I felt like this is probably the second best game that he's played since probably the Kansas City one. This is like the smoothest the offense has looked at times. Obviously, outside of the interceptions, right? But this is the smoothest the offense has looked, the most dependable the passing offense was, especially on third down, all season, man. All season, which, maybe this could be a good sign. He's going to have a good second 2 games after this. But, man, I don't know, dude. I don't know. Betting on Baker Mayfield at this point kind of seems like lost money. But we'll see what happens with him. This was the best that I've seen the offense look, and honestly, I don't know if that's more of a credit to how well they were playing in parts or a credit to how awful this offense has looked, that I can look at a 4 interception game and go, well, you're able to move the ball at least, right? Like, that, we weren't able to move the ball for the last month and a half with either quarterback that was in there, right? Nick Mullins, Baker Mayfield, like, scoring more than 14 points was a absolute struggle with this team. That wasn't the struggle, right? Getting in the red zone this week really wasn't the struggle. They were able to move the ball well. They barely punted. I think they punted like twice, And, they also, I think, threw more interceptions than they punted today. So there is that. But even 2 of those interceptions was in the red zone. Missed opportunities all around. The kicker, Christopher, he missed an extra point, which turned into a missed 2-point conversion, which, that's 2 points right there, right? If he makes that extra point and then he makes a second extra point, we're at 24-24. Maybe that changes the math of the game. Maybe that changes how the Browns attack that final drive. And let's talk about that final drive, right? Because, again, if it were 24-24, I think they would have been, ironically, a little bit more conservative than they were on that last drive. They were very aggressive on that last drive, at least after the clock hit 1 minute. And I honestly don't understand why. That last drive, they got to midfield at a pretty decent rate. I mean, they got the ball with 2:12 left at the end of the game, so they had the 2-minute warning and 3 timeouts. They got the ball to about midfield with all 3 of their timeouts intact, and they really did that off of the strength of the run game. Baker did complete a couple of passes in that stretch, but they did get it off the strength of the run game. Ernest Johnson had a good run in there. I think Nick Chubb had a couple. And then they got to the 50-yard line, and it's like they just stopped running the ball. I think they got to the 40-yard line, actually, and they just stopped running the ball. And I felt like that was the worst place to stop running the ball. I felt like, hey, you have 3 timeouts. You are on first down. Well, first down, second down. It was like a 3rd and 10. And I felt like at that 3rd and 10, let's try one of those draw plays. Let's run the ball. Let's see what we can get here. Use that first timeout. Now, again, part of the reason why they don't want to use that timeout, and I'm just trying to be fair to the coaching staff, is that Aaron Rodgers is on the other side, and you don't want to end up in a situation where you leave him 30 seconds left and he beats you because all he needs is a field goal too, and he has a pretty good field goal kicker as well. So I can understand that thinking, and that's what drove the aggressiveness at the end of the game. And, the passing game, as stupid as it sounds, when Baker wasn't throwing interceptions, was moving pretty well throughout the game, right? So it was a dependable, well, it wasn't dependable, right? 4 interceptions isn't dependable, but it was able to be moved on. So there was some, an element of trust that you would have in there. But instead, we decided to run the ball. I mean, we decided to throw the ball. Who knows, right? If they get stacked up there and run the ball 2 times, and we're mad that they went super conservative at that point in the game. And, it's really a no-win situation at this point of the game when it comes to how people are going to interpret your play calling. Because, again, the same situation happened last week. They decided to run the ball with Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb gets stuffed on 3rd and 3. People are mad about that they didn't throw the ball with Nick Mullins. This situation happens this week. They decide to throw the ball on a 3rd and 10. And people are upset about it, right? Like, it's kind of one of those no-win situations if you don't convert, because everybody's going to say you should have did the opposite. But that is what it is with that. I would have preferred that, given that Nick Chubb and Ernest Johnson were so hot in that 4th quarter, you would have at least given them a couple more runs to at least get that ball into field goal range. Because, again, they were only down 2. They just needed to get a field goal. You were at the 50. I felt like with 3 timeouts left with 1 minute, you could have gotten those 20 yards in the run game and kicked the field goal. Who knows if you make the field goal, because Christopher is not a proven commodity at kicker whatsoever. But at least you put it on that, right? You get it to that point. You have that chance to win. Instead, we throw the ball. Donovan Peoples-Jones gets held. It does not get called. Let's be honest here. There were multiple pass interferences against the Browns that did not get called. But also, I have to be fair to the other side of this. There were a lot of pass interferences that the Browns did to the Packers that didn't get called, right? The refs were calling this one loose. And you have to be aware of that, right? You have to be aware that this is how the game's being called. They're not calling these pass interferences, so be careful. Do not throw the ball expecting to get a flag. Like, be careful with how you run your routes. You know what I mean? It's how they're calling the game right now. And, you just lose track of that. Yeah, I felt like you let it slip through your hands a little bit on that last drive, right? I felt like maybe one or two more runs. Let's try to get Nick Chubb out on the edge. Let's get a screen to Nick Chubb. Just get the ball to Nick Chubb because he was the hot hand. He was the hot player. He was the one that made plays. Again, I'm all for getting the ball into the hands of playmakers. And in those final plays, we're throwing the ball to Donovan Peoples-Jones. We're throwing the ball to David Njoku. Where is Jarvis Landry in that situation, who had a pretty good game here? How many yards did Jarvis have? 55 on 4 receptions. It looked a lot better on TV than it does on the stat sheet, but he had a pretty good game. Nick Chubb had a pretty good game. He was also the leading wide receiver, 3 receptions, 58 yards. Obviously had that one long reception here. Again, it's the same methodology why I'm not happy with the play calling this week at the last drive, why I wasn't happy, why I was fine with what they did last week. At those situations, you got to put the ball in the hands of your best playmaker, and Nick Chubb's your best playmaker, and he clearly was today. And instead, we're going with the slant route to Donovan Peoples-Jones. Now, again, they were converting on those 3rd and longs pretty consistently, and if that got called to the book, it would have been a first down for either pass interference or catch. But, you left it up to chance a little bit. And I felt like I would feel a lot better if they just left it up to Nick Chubb at that moment, or at least a little bit more than they did. I'm not saying they should have ran the ball like 8 times in a 2-minute drill or anything like that. But I am saying that, hey, when you were at that 50, I felt like they gave up on the run a little bit too soon, even though they had 3 timeouts. And that's what's disappointing about it. At the end of the day, they played a lot better than I thought they would in this game. I don't think there's really room for a moral victory or anything like that. It's definitely not a moral victory at 7-8. This team is well beyond moral victories. But I will say that at least the last 2 weeks, I've been proud to actually watch this team, and I couldn't say that for the last 6 weeks, right? When they were giving up 45 unanswered, almost losing to the Lions, like just giving poor efforts on both sides of the ball. It was just abysmal. This week, it was just like, hey, you got some bad luck here or there. Baker had one of those interception explosion games, but you still were able to pull close and almost win this game, and there's an argument that you should have won this game. But that's my thoughts on this game. We'll see what happens with the rest of the season. We'll see what happens with the rest of the AFC North. And if the Browns still somehow have a chance to win this division after this game, we'll find out by the end of Monday. But that's going to be it for this week's video. Again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.